Hey everybody, TacticAngel back on the PlayStation 5 to take a look at another premium ship in World of Warships Legends. This time we'll be looking at the Dido, the Tier 5 premium British cruiser. For this review, we'll start with some history, move into analysis, discuss commanders, run down the stats, and then finish off with some gameplay. If you want to skip around, you should see some time codes below to help you out. The story of the Dido class almost begins with the story of the weapon that would come to arm her. In 1935, the Royal Navy had 4-inch guns, and they had 5.5-inch guns. And 4-inch guns would have struggled to penetrate surface targets, while 5.5-inch guns were too cumbersome to make into an anti-aircraft gun. As a result, the Royal Navy looked to produce its own 5-inch gun and 5.1-inch gun. As the story goes, the 5-inch gun was too close to the 4.5-inch gun they had also developed, so the 5.1 was chosen as the basis, then enlarged to 5.25 inches just to maximize the explosive force. This 5.25-inch gun would go on to be the secondary battery for the new King George V class of battleships. Meanwhile, in 1933, the director of the Tactical Division requested a small and inexpensive cruiser specifically designed for an anti-aircraft role to replace the aging C and D class cruiser. Also in 1934, designs were being drawn up for an escort cruiser. Tests of the new guns were favorable in a twin mount, and in 1936 these two ideas more or less came together, and Bob's your uncle. A little heavier than the initially requested 4,000 tons, the design approved would weigh closer to 5,300 and carry a battery of 10 of these new 5.25-inch guns. Later that year, one of the ships was given the name Dido, after the legendary first queen of Carthage, and further cementing that the British really were the most creative in naming ships. Dido herself was laid down in October of 1937. She launched in July of 1939 and was commissioned into service in September 1940. As a curiosity, Dido was not laid down first, launched first, or commissioned first, but the Admiralty chose that Dido was the lead ship of the class, even if she was 6th laid down and was narrowly the 4th commissioned. Most of Dido's early success was in the Atlantic, helping to escort HMS Furious to Africa, then joining up for convoy duty in the Atlantic. But in 1941, Dido moved to the Mediterranean to help escort carriers and planes to Malta, and then help with the evacuation of Crete, which included moving some $7 million of gold bullion. In May 1940, Dido embarked around 1,000 soldiers at Heraklion, alongside other ships, and after departing was targeted by Stuka dive bombers. She received a heavy hit in turret B, killing all 12 men within, plus 34 more soldiers and sailors beneath the decks. She'd stick it out for a few more weeks until the Italians surrendered at Eritrea with temporary repairs, and then Dido crossed the Atlantic to Brooklyn for repairs and refit. It's actually at this point that she'd receive her 5th turret. When launched, Dido only had 4 of the twin turrets, since they quite literally couldn't produce enough of them. In place of turret C, also known as the 3rd one, the ship was launched with a 4-inch gun for the launch of star shells. This sort of situation was common among Didos, with different ships sometimes missing different turrets, and the 3rd group of her sisters launching with 4.5-inch guns in twin turrets as dedicated AA cruisers. That's the same 4.5-inch gun that we mentioned earlier. Though capable of being relatively fast-firing, the 133mm round weighed about 80 pounds, which is a lot of weight for a manually loaded gun, and certainly would have been more of a workout, shell for shell, than a 55-pound American 5-inch shell. But if you think they might have chosen differently, given the benefit of hindsight, the last Dido ships were completed with 4 of these 5.25-inch turrets and simply enhanced AA suites. This work would keep Dido out of the fight until November, and then she was back to work in the Mediterranean for more convoy duty. She was part of Rear Admiral Vian's command at the Second Battle of Sirte and took a bomb to her stern. Short-handed, she'd sail for Massawa, where crews worked round the clock to get her back into service, since the British only had a handful of ships in the Eastern Med at the time. Thankfully, she wasn't needed for any actions there, and in December, Dido sailed to help finish off the fight against Italy in providing AA cover as part of Operation Torch, fire support against northern Sicily as part of a diversion connected with Operation Husky, then landings at Palermo and Bizerta, and spent some more time at Malta as a troop transport following Italy's surrender. Adding to her diverse service, she'd escort a convoy to the Soviet Union, support landings at Normandy, but really the crowning achievement of her latter history was sailing for Copenhagen to accept the surrender of the Kriegsmarine. After the war, Dido had a few more feathers in her cap, taking King George VI and Queen Elizabeth to the Isle of Man. Though she was decommissioned in October 1947, she would attend the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II as flagship of the Reserve Fleet in 1953. Like most all other British ships, though, she could not avoid the breakers and was sold for scrap in July 1957. As for Dido in game, you should have a little bit of indication of how the ship plays, since one of the theoretical sisters exists as Ramat that you can play for free. Others of an English persuasion might look at Dido and say something like, "That looks like a flint at home, isn't it?" And to that I can simply say, yeah, bruv. But the chief advantages of Dido lie really more with her improved ability to survive a game, not only by sporting more HP than would seem appropriate for such a little ship, but she also has excellent concealment, and she stacks on top of that smoke. Not just any old smoke, though British smoke. That's not the only coveted consumable that she has, because you're going to have either sonar or DFAA, and every other gunny boat's favorite gimmick, the main battery reload booster, but even more. And that's really the only reason I can think that this screen suggests the ship has above average reload, because the very first thing I thought after shooting the guns was, wow, that's a really slow reload for a 5-inch gun. It's actually not a fast reload for a 6-inch gun. It's not even fractionally below average for a light cruiser, and it really is a light cruiser, so amongst other things, you should expect to struggle with penetrations, and maybe a little more importantly, the real Dido was expected to repel up to 6-inch guns reasonably well. There's a lot of things that are going to be tossing more than 6-inch shells at you, and Dido's armor won't be much use for that at all. All in all, if well played, this can balance out in Dido's favor though. However pedestrian the direct damage is, however average the fire starting chance is, Dido has 10 guns, and it can sit in the middle of the map just whittling away at targets in one of its many smoke screens, and then punish you for hitting your damage control party at the wrong time. Folks who will enjoy Dido probably already enjoy Ramat, and frankly, the whole line. Flint also plays a lot like this ship without some of the so-called advantages that are of no help to the Flint whatsoever. Dido is very much a supporting character that, when the chips are down, can often pull off some pretty impressive stuff thanks to the tricks she has up her sleeve, but if hung out to dry, can die just as easily. When we start to look at commanders, there's a lot of choice here. If we want to start with Bruce Fraser, his chief advantage is the ability to get the highest fire chance. It's also notable that Dido's range is not incredible, and he most easily can fix that. He's also got 2 solid ways to make this thing faster, though one of it is at the expense of the only survivability he offers, or the somewhat forlorn hope that the AP on this thing is actually going to do much at any sort of range where you'd actually want to be. And that's really the only downside. Bruce doesn't leave a lot of room for error. Swinging all the way to defense, Tennant has several defensive skills to help reduce the damage you take, though this time those choices are competing against speed or comfort. In my book, Tennant just makes this feel better with faster turrets and better maneuverability, because his base trait continues to feel like taking 2 aspirin because you think someone might kick you in the groin. And for a cruiser with fast smokes, extra survivability is arguably not something you're going to need a lot of. But however you feel about Tennant's base trait, Jellicoe's doesn't do anything at all for Dido. He also follows this up with the standard assortment of uninspiring skills. Really, the best and almost the only reason you would run Dido with him would be for the triple concealment build, or if you're trying to compensate for your rudder or engine getting taken out a lot, which does happen actually quite a bit in Dido, but by the time you're getting shot, you're often just moments from not needing to worry about the game at all anymore, if you follow my meaning. But as always, fast smoke cruisers often benefit from turret, and the reason why you do this is entirely for a high-level Smogathon build. This sort of annoying build could allow you to sit in the middle of the map for more than half of the duration of the battle, as long as no one got too close or caught you with the odd torpedo. He also offers you RPF, extra torpedo range, damage, and reload, and the same triple concealment possibility as Jellicoe. The only downside here is that the only way to improve your gun performance is those inspirations. So as we jump next into stats, remember that in spite of never having exist, the Ramat depicts a Dido-class ship, even if no Dido-class ship was ever transferred to Malaysia, but it is a good basis for comparison. First, as always, is your survivability, and you might be a bit surprised at how healthy Dido is. With 29,500 hit points, she's remarkably average, particularly for what we might call a super light cruiser. By comparison, this is 25% more HP than Ramat. Her armor scheme is, however, totally what you would expect. Important things to note: the bow is 13 millimeters, which means 8-inch shells will go straight through it at any angle. So both heavy cruisers and battleships can punch this directly in the face with quite a bit of success. You have 3 opportunities for one of those shells to probably break one of your forward guns before it hits the unimpressive 25mm plate guarding your citadel, but that also sits above the waterline. It is guarded by an 89mm belt. Obviously, that can bounce anything, but you're playing a dangerous game relying on that. A clever player will just choose to shoot you in the front or rear of the citadel, but it does start a little further back than you would expect. Needless to say, Dido is quite vulnerable to almost every shell that can be shot at it, and the 4% torpedo protection is likely not to make too much of a difference in that regard either. Your main battery consists of 10 QF, which means quick firing, 133mm 50 caliber artillery. These are arranged in 3 super firing turrets forward and 2 to the rear. I mention quick firing because the first thing you'll likely notice is that they don't feel that quick. And at 8 seconds, it's actually half a second slower than her sister ship in the game. The 14.3 kilometer range is only 200 meters less than average, which is 300 better than you would expect from Ramat. The 8% fire chance gives you a pretty average fire starting potential over time, and while 1900 damage is pretty low, you're armed effectively with destroyer guns, so targets have to be pretty close to you in order for you to penetrate them. When they do, 2550 isn't much damage, and overall you're pretty much in the middle of the pack as far as damage over time, most of the time. While Ramat probably really has you beat in terms of torpedo range and damage, Dido has the same arrangement of 1 wing launcher with 3 torpedoes on each side. 72-second reload is actually pretty fast, and the 15,867 isn't bad either. It's just that 8-kilometer range is not long enough to allow you to fire these from the comfort of stealth for the most part. But they are standard torpedoes, so you can hit destroyers with them, and you can launch them single file, and that's always something people appreciate, I think. For being an AA cruiser, you might be surprised that Dido has a below average AA rating for a tier 5 cruiser. Some of that is owed to her max range of only 4.5, and at that range, she's putting out a pretty modest 41 damage. If someone wants to strike you, that would improve to 114 damage per second, which is about 10% below average. I still wouldn't put this in the tippy top of my list of things not to hit as a carrier, but it's only occasionally intimidating. For maneuverability, I have no idea why Dido is 34 knots, but she is. She wouldn't make the track team, but that's still reasonably fast for a cruiser at tier 5. She also has a very nice, almost best in class, turning circle and a very responsive rudder. So all of this is good. Dido also has great concealment, beating out Ramat by 300 meters, and that's in spite of Ramat being about half a kilometer less visible than most tier 5 cruisers. Amongst equally dedicated stealth boats, you really can only expect to lose the spotting competition with Italian cruisers in Misora, except that I'm not actually sure that's true because I can't ever remember seeing one in game. You've also got about half a kilometer from the air over most, and another confusingly excellent 4.6 kilometer sea detectability while firing from smoke. And that's a real advantage as we come to consumables, because after we say that you have a typical cruiser damage control party, we'll skip straight ahead and point out that you have smokes. These are short duration and quick reloading British smokes, arguably the most useful and desirable in the game because it's low commitment. Between the 20-second deployment and the 40-second dispersion time, you can still sit for about a minute. And you'll have a very short 70-second reload. Moving back from the first slot, you've got a choice between sonar and defensive fire AA. The sonar is actually 200 meters more than you'd expect, as this is the performance that you get out of ships like Belfast and Cheshire, one tier up. If you would prefer the emotional support AA consumable though, it does all the normal things. For my money, there's always a good chance you'll be sitting in your own smoke, which tends to be a torpedo magnet, and there's a slightly lesser chance that you'll be in a carrier game unless you division up with one, which is the only reason I might consider that in Dido. Well, other than if I was at the point where if I see one more plane, I might defenestrate my controller, my television, or something else. All right, enough teasing. You also have a main battery reload booster, and it's a beauty. People get excited when this number is 50%. When you realize you're pumping out 3 shells for every one you normally would, well, it brings a tear to your eye. And if it doesn't, then maybe the 3-minute reload will. All right, and with all that out of the way, we're gonna jump into some gameplay. We're gonna be on Trident. We start in the east spawn, which isn't that far east. I will go ahead and put my commander up on the screen. We are running around with John Jellicoe. We've got all of the stealth, which is the main purpose of this. We're a little bit faster, which is always nice. And then the other couple things are helping us hit a little bit more accurately, do a little bit more in terms of fire chance, and be able to do it at a slightly longer range. All in all, this is it's a pretty comfortable build. Dido can take just about anything you want to put on it, and this is just the way that I often like to play ships. It allows me to move around the map without getting spotted, and if you're relatively fast, destroyer-like cruiser, it's fun. In any case, our primary function in terms of an offensive unit is maybe a little boring, I guess. It's pretty basic. What we're going to do is try to find an island, and if we can't find an island, you can see we have 6 smokes. Shooting at Graf Spee is certainly an option. And you can kind of see, not exactly terrible shell velocity, but it's not fast. Apparently just about the only people who could actually see the Graf Spee, so we're going to back up. The Nevada ought to be a slightly easier target to hit, and ultimately being able to shoot multiple targets is a pretty good thing. That allows us to spread around the love. If we set one ship on fire, we can switch over to another and start applying multiple damage over times and really rack up the amount of impact the Dido can get without actually having to shoot our guns all that much. Now you can see that we have a pretty long reload. It is probably pretty close to the 8 seconds that it starts with. And now we've popped out of our smoke. Unfortunately for that first smoke, we only managed to land 12 shots, and very few of those appear to have done much of anything like damage. So we're gonna move around a little bit. We're getting a little bit closer to this island because it might allow us to fire without even using a consumable. Not that having 5 smokes at this point is a real disadvantage, but why use them if you don't need to? We're briefly spotted by the Graf Spee as it is pushing pretty hard on the other side. Start a fire there. Nevada looks like it should be noted that there are 2 Nevadas, by the way. Probably put out a fire.
Smoke generator activated.
This spot might be from the middle. We did catch, maybe out of the corner of our eye, that there was a smoke screen in the middle of the map. Whether offensive or defensive, there was probably some reason why it was put there.
Smoke screen set.
And we keep looking back and forth between the Graf Spee and the Nevada. Obviously, Nevada isn't like super high priority because she's still quite a ways out there. And yep, here we're gonna have to start dealing with the Graf Spee. We've got the hill in the background. It does not look as though those torpedoes are going to finish off the cruiser, so we'll shoot him a few more times before he can swing his guns over in our direction.
We destroyed an enemy cruiser.
And as we move up a little more, you can see that the rear turrets are, in fact, 360, which is, I think, super useful. And here we go, slamming on the brakes. Thankfully, he's shooting HE. He barely catches us with, it looks like, one shell. Not too bad.
Smoke screen set.
But you can see at this point we're very committed to doing the normal annoying cruiser thing. You spotted on the mini map that the hill is behind us. We turn our guns, and as soon as we get them on target, we hit the reload booster, and it is good night, Irene.
Enemy destroyer blown up.
That reload booster is just so sexy. You live for moments like that.
Torpedoes direct front.
Looks like those were assuming that I would not continue forward. We're playing around a little bit with this island. You can see our forward guns are not 360. They do, in fact, have to rotate the long way around. And we're trying to keep an eye on the Pensacola because, for one, it would be good to be able to cap that base. As a relatively stealthy cruiser, we're going to be able to do that for the most part. But we're going to try to time when this gentleman comes around that corner. Our torpedo range is not particularly good, and it is never really particularly good unless you decide to go with something like Turwit. And it does look a lot like Pensacola is not going to pay attention to the base, which is fine, which is great, actually. There is more to the game than simply doing damage. I'm told there are things. If I remember one thing about my days of running a Pensacola, it is that the turrets are not very fast.
Smoke generator.
I go ahead, activate the smoke generator because it looked like he was swinging his whole boat around in order to get some shots on me. I will happily sit in the smoke and take the free cap.
Smoke screen set.
We're going to adjust for our next move, which is going to be back across the middle of the map. We just got a little bit of time to sit here, think about what we want to do. Obviously, there's the chance that the Pensacola swings back around. And if he does, that's going to make our life a little bit difficult because, I mean, he can punch us straight through the front of the ship. And I'm not even sure I realize that at this point, but I'm open to the possibility. It's a heavy cruiser, and this is a particularly poorly armored ship. So he's doing a pretty solid job there, fighting off one of our friendlies. We have, right now, the ship advantage, and we also have the cap advantage. So really this is just try not to do something profoundly stupid. That's really what my team should be doing, and what I should be doing in particular. We continue to try to help. You can kind of see his turrets are in exactly the wrong direction in order to threaten me, and since we know that it's going to take him a good while to get all of them on us,
Battle ends in 5 minutes.
we'll just deal with that. We're going to hit our reload booster again. You can see we creep over that high caliber threshold. And at this point, our shells are getting a little bit floaty. And this is where, oh, TacticAngel, not such a great shot. He's doing a good amount of wiggly boat stuff. And really, I don't feel like I need to go and kill him. But then again, it does look like there's only one ship on my team, which is an Omaha. Now, I do feel reasonably okay that the Omaha should win, but he does have more or less the same problem that I do, which is that the Pensacola can basically punch his ticket at any angle. And I know I don't want to fight him, and I feel for some reason he has a better chance being a tier down with more hit points. So at this point, we're going to start making just bad decisions. And I'm going to point it out, because I start seeing that the destroyer is capping A, and I have a problem with that because I just used a reload booster on another destroyer, and wouldn't it be fun to do it again? Now, we do have a minute and 10 seconds. We're not really thinking about that, but we're feeling pretty good about our possibilities. I love tier 5. I feel so powerful at tier 5, so wise, and you're just making all sorts of good decisions. This is a bad decision, and it's actually about at this point that I realize this is stupid. If I were watching someone else play this game, sailing into A, I'd be like, spoiler alert, I get a little bit fired up when I'm not making videos. But I'd be like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? This is a bad idea. And those torpedoes are an excellent example of why I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I will tell you that this does all more or less work itself out. Like, I don't pay the price for being an idiot here, but I clearly have no idea where the enemy destroyer is. This would be a slightly better play if I was playing with turret and I had RPF, so I had the indicator that would tell me at least, you know, like where the torpedoes are going to be coming from. But if I take one torpedo here, it's possible that that guy just guns me down because I don't know where he is. It's going to take a few seconds for... This is just bad. I'm just saying. I'm leaving it in. This is bad. Don't do this. This is bad. Anyway, we win. So closing thoughts on Dido. I really had a good time with this ship. Even if she is Flint at home in Jolio, England, she isn't burdened by the forever flight times that Flint has. And the consumable combination here really makes a lot more sense to me. I get to play a bit closer, be annoying in the open, and if given a chance, I can reload boost a target that I feel could really benefit from a couple of permanent fires, or I can just delete a destroyer, which obviously I very much wanted to do in this game more than once. Plus, at this point, I think they're just good-looking ships with a real history, which is a nice change. And that sort of stuff always appeals to a certain audience, myself included. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on Dido. Let me know yours down below, and I'll see you on the next one.